But I want to bring Fred right up here right now, and you could bring that with you if you want, Fred. Just to get right down to business.
Page 34 chart.
Yeah, look at it. I'll tell you what it says. It says that the U.S. spends so much more, it's shocking, than every other developed country, and yet we live about 6 years less than all the other developed countries, and it's just getting worse by the year, and therefore it's untenable. And one of the things that came up a lot yesterday on that was the whole Warren Buffett argument just of last week, that this issue of healthcare costs for business may be more problematic than taxes as a competitive disadvantage for American companies. So anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about.
We could talk about that.
Well, you have a great perspective, and let me quickly introduce Fred. Fred is the most eminent venture capitalist in New York, and I was thinking about Fred's work and his kind of role in the industry. In a way, you're the most successful VC of the second generation of the internet, in a sense, because you funded Twitter and Tumblr and a bunch of other, Etsy, Meetup, Kickstarter, so many great companies. And it's really interesting because, you're often sort of grouped in with, some from a slightly earlier generation, the John Doerrs and what's his name from Benchmark, Gurley, of course, is actually a little closer to your generation. And you've served on boards with him, I think, haven't you? But anyway, but the fact is, you're one of the only ones, maybe Gurley would fall in this category too, and that's why we had him talking about it in November, actually, who has never really participated in the founding of one of the giant colossi that is now sort of looming over society with such sort of overbearingness. So maybe that's what we should start with, since I already mentioned it. Because that did come up an awful lot yesterday. We even had somebody from Facebook here. And from my perspective as a tech journalist, the role of Facebook, Google, and Amazon in particular, but also Apple and Microsoft, is increasingly sort of the environmental question that doesn't affect just the industry and its opportunities, but society as a whole. And I'd just be curious to hear your perspective on how you think about those companies in our lives and our societies now.
I think that what happened to Microsoft back in the late 90s will happen to them. Just don't know when.
You mean sort of tending towards at least short-term irrelevance?
No, they are optimizing around an attention-driven business model.
Yeah.
Somebody will create a new business model that is not attention-driven, the way that the attention-driven business model disrupted the enterprise software business model, and they won't be able to react to it quickly enough, and they will get disrupted.
You mean like a social network that you had to pay for or something like that?
No, I think probably the most disruptive business model is the token model that we're seeing emerge in the blockchain, which is really a native business model for the open source kind of creative commons type. You think of something like Wikipedia or something like Linux. We're talking about systems that are decentralized, open, and community powered. We've never had a business model that could power those things, so they've been free, right? Linux is free and Wikipedia is free. They run a little campaign once a year, like NPR, and we give them all a bunch of money, but ultimately it's not really a business model. But the whole idea of a token is that we all use those tokens to participate in those systems, and the people who create the value in the systems get rewarded with the tokens. The people who participate in the systems spend the tokens, and the tokens increase in value in the way that a stock price would increase in value as the impacts of the system grow. And it's a very native, elegant business model for these sort of community-powered systems. And I think that it's very disruptive to the attention-based business model. And I think that there are going to be very, very large companies that will be built up from the ground up based on those business models.
But they wouldn't be, quote-unquote, social networks, most likely, right?
I don't know what they'll be. I mean, they could be. But right,
why is it so disruptive to the attention-based business model? I could see those things succeeding. But why would that disrupt Facebook's ability to monetize attention with advertising on a global scale?
Because people will opt out of Facebook because they realize that what they're doing is they're basically giving Facebook all their data so Facebook can run advertising against them. And a lot of people are already opting out of Facebook. We had a once a year we get all the CEOs.
He's always been a lot more negative about Facebook than me, by the way. But anyway,
it's true. But we had a gathering of the CEOs of all of our portfolio companies. We do it once a year. We had it last week. And the beginning of the day, we go around a room just like this, and people talk about like the thing that has changed the most for them personally as they run their companies in the past year. And the thing that came out, surprisingly, was people are not using social media anymore. The CEOs of these companies are not using social media anymore other than to promote themselves and their companies. So they've unfollowed everybody, and they're just using it as a broadcast mechanism, but they're not consuming anymore. And I think a lot of us feel that way. I mean, the minute that Trump got elected, I muted that word on Twitter. I don't follow Trump. I don't listen to anything about him. I have opted out of that.
He told me this before we started this morning. I was amazed considering how, diverting at least it was to read the paper this morning.
It's counterproductive. I watch my wife. She spends 2 or 3 hours a day obsessing about Donald Trump.
I was almost late this morning because I had to read about half an hour's worth of New York Times stories.
No, you don't, and you shouldn't.
No,
you shouldn't. It's a
I
waste
wanted
of your
to know,
time.
Fred. I'm sorry. But okay, but I'm sorry. I sort of interrupted you. The point about Trump was what again? That you muted him. You muted him on Twitter.
Trump is a troll.
Okay, right.
Trump is a troll, and what we must do to trolls is we must ignore trolls. They get their power from us paying attention to them. We have to just stop paying attention to him.
Okay.
The democracy and the political system will take care of him in due course. I don't know when that will happen, but he will be taken care of, and we can move on and do other more important things, like fix the fucking healthcare system.
Right.
That
Seriously.
would be very productive.
It is important, clearly, absolutely. No, I mean, look at that chart. So, and I think we'll probably circle back around to the Facebook's threats or non-threats, but, I would like you to just talk a little more. It was really stunning to me, considering you don't listen to any news about Trump, but yet you are so confident that our democracy is still fully robust enough to handle whatever threats get thrown its way.
Well, look at the facts, okay? The immigration bans, both of them, have been thrown out by the courts. Obamacare reform failed to pass the House the first time, barely passed the House the second time, doesn't look like it'll pass the Senate. His entire legislative agenda is basically being repudiated by our political system. And I just don't think he's going to be very effective. We have a democracy that works. We have a court system that works. Even in Washington, that is controlled by one party, he can't get his agenda through, right? And the thing that's the most beautiful thing about our political system is that politicians optimize for self-preservation. That's the one thing that they optimize for. And so when somebody becomes toxic, they run for the hills, okay? So they will ultimately rid him of our political system when he becomes too toxic.
I love how succinct you are. It's great for a fast-moving interview. But let's go to another company. I mean, you've sort of dispensed with Facebook and Google, but what about Amazon? It's a different kind of company. It's not attention-based in quite the same way. Its ambitions are perhaps even more vast. Its successes are shockingly great in so many ways. I mean, I don't know how much you have. I know Google Home as well as Alexa, but I mean that has been an astonishing success. I think from a many perspectives.
Well, I actually think that of the big four, Amazon might be the most disruption protected. I don't know if that's the right word, but I guess you understand what I mean. And I think that they built a really diverse set of businesses, and as a result, I think that they, it's like a stool with like 10 legs on it, and even if 2 or 3 of them get knocked out, they're still going to have great business. And Amazon Web Services in particular is just a really amazing business, and most of our portfolio companies run on it. So I agree with you on that.
But so in other words, does it affect the landscape of innovation in society in a negative way?
Look, it's hard, right? Because the other day, my wife and I, she said to me, "You need some new clothes." I said, "Yeah, you're right, I do. Let's go shopping." And then she's like, "I don't really want to go shopping. Let's just buy the stuff online. And if we don't like it, we'll send it back." And that's what we did. We didn't even go into a store. I think retail is really suffering, and particularly like brick and mortar retail is really suffering. And it's not just Amazon, but Amazon's obviously the big gorilla in that space. It's not all good. I guess it's kind of good for us as consumers that I didn't have to go shopping that day. I could instead just buy it online and get it sent to my house.
It is, obviously. I mean, that's why Amazon continues. I mean, there's probably not a single person in this room who isn't a good customer of Amazon, not just a customer. So,
and Prime, by the way, is just a genius business model. Now, I don't know whether it was an accident or whether Bezos figured this out 10 years ago, but Prime, is giving them a competitive advantage in the television business. It's giving them a competitive advantage in the music business, right? Because I want free shipping, now I'm going to get free movies and I'm going to get free music, and everybody has to compete with that, has to compete with somebody who's effectively subsidizing their music and video service with a shipping service.
Yeah, and they can keep cranking the price up on that slowly.
By the way, it's anti-competitive. Okay,
right,
let's just be honest about that.
Thank you. I wanted you to say something controversial about that. Okay.
It is. It's anti-competitive. By definition, it's anti-competitive.
Yeah, they are. I mean, there's several monopolies emerging that are of a of a new sort. Of a new sort. Yeah. I mean, well, let me just go to the
But I still believe that there are every 20 or 30 years, the technology industry comes up with a new technology and a new business model that the incumbents have a hard time reacting to, and I think it's going to happen again. And I think even Amazon will be impacted by it. I think they will be. Look, I mean, Microsoft got massively impacted by the internet. Massively impacted. I mean, remember, we were back there in the 90s, right? We were like, oh my God, Microsoft, they're going to own the entire tech industry, right? 20 years later, they're like number 5 or number 6.
And Linux didn't help them too much either, yeah.
That's my point, though, right? So but they're still around. They're still a big company.
They're actually sort of thriving now, yeah.
Right, better management.
Yeah.
So I think I think that none of these companies are going to go out of business.
And the blockchain, you seem to have a lot of confidence that either blockchain itself or that kind of model will play a very significant role in this next wave of innovation. Is that overstating it?
Absolutely. Look, the architecture of the internet is beautiful, but there's a bunch of things it doesn't do very well. And we can just talk about some of them. The whole cybersecurity issue, right? The fact that things are getting hacked right and left. Things like malware and spam and phishing and all that kind of stuff. Things like the fact that the monetization models tend to be very attention-driven. The fact that all of our data is stored in someone else's servers and not our servers. So our search history Google has, and our purchase history Amazon has, and our friend graph Facebook has.
Email Google.
Right, email Google too, right. So none of that is actually good, right? If we would go back and re-architect the internet, we would have not done any of that. And Walter Isaacson wrote a great article about this maybe a year or two ago where he outlined this whole thing. Says like, this doesn't work right, this doesn't work right, this doesn't work right, this doesn't work right. We got to fix those things, right? And I think that we will fix those things, and new technologies will emerge that will fix those things, new protocols. I think this is all going to be protocol-based innovation. I don't think this is necessarily going to be new companies are going to be built, but we're going to have decentralized storage, we're going to have decentralized compute, we're going to have decentralized security, and all these sorts of things are going to happen, and I think they're going to most likely be monetized with a token or a coin-based business model as opposed to a subscription or an advertising-based business model.
And you're invested in Ethereum, am I right on that? No.
I own some Ethereum.
Yeah, you don't, okay. So,
well, that's the other beautiful thing. By the way, the other beautiful thing is
Ethereum's a blockchain kind of wannabe.
Here's the thing that's broken.
Corporate-ish.
The whole corporate finance system on the internet is broken, okay? Rich people like me or venture capitalists like me get to invest in the next Facebook and the next Twitter, the next Google, right? And the average person, they're not even allowed to invest in that because it's not a publicly traded company and they have to be an accredited investor to invest in it privately. The beautiful thing about crypto tokens is anybody can buy them. I know people who bought Ethereum at 30 cents. It's now $90. Okay, these are just average people who put $1,000 into Ethereum at 30 cents, okay? And this is the way it should work. If I'm using a piece of technology, if I'm using Facebook or I'm using Twitter or I'm using Google, and I'm like, wow, this is the most amazing thing in the world, I should be able to take a little bit of my money and go buy stock in that thing.
Well, actually, I argued when Facebook went public that they should do a special offering to their users. They couldn't have cared less about that idea, but there were people, I mean, Google tried some slight version of that with the reverse auction that they did when they went public. I mean, trying to make it accessible.
But here's the problem.
Right?
Here's the problem with that, right? Are you doing your users a good thing by charging them, $80 a share for the stock, right? Like, is that a good thing? Because then maybe the stock goes to 40. Then you screwed your users. It's too late by the time you go public. You got to do it at the ground floor, right at the very beginning. That's when you got to do it.
And when you say coin-based, token-based, that's all sort of the heritage of blockchain, although it may or may not use blockchain and Bitcoin, right?
People when they think about blockchain, they think of Bitcoin, which is kind of a problem because Bitcoin has so much bad baggage. You got Mt. Gox, you got Silk Road, you've got ransomware. You got all this bad stuff that people have done with Bitcoin. It's a little bit like BitTorrent that got used. BitTorrent wasn't a bad piece of technology. It got used badly, and so it got harmed. I think that Bitcoin probably will not be the dominant blockchain, public blockchain, for a whole host of reasons, and that's one of them.
Okay. So many things to talk about, so little time. The government, the role of government in this age. I mean, it's interesting. You're coming across as a pretty big league optimist.
I'm a huge optimist. I don't think there's a bigger optimist that I know.
I haven't heard anybody talking more optimistically than you're talking right now, because you're optimistic both about...
Mark Andreessen's an optimist, too. I listened to him on a podcast yesterday. He may be more optimistic than me.
Well, you're optimistic about democracy and capitalism, which is actually not the common mindset at the moment. But what do you think? I mean, obviously, you can't be too optimistic about the attitude the American government has had toward innovation and technology as a force in the economy and society, because they have had no attitude toward it. They seem to be disregarding it, or maybe that's what you want.
Well, it hasn't been bad, right? I mean, I don't think, like, if we go back and look at the emergence of the internet and machine learning and CRISPR and clean power, solar and wind and all these things that have happened that are great, flying cars maybe soon. Like, we're not being harmed by the fact that the government's not really paying a ton of attention to it. Like, maybe if they were amplifying all of this, we'd be better. But you can't argue that we're harmed by it. And by the way, the U.S. is the center of all this innovation. The center of all this innovation. And our government hasn't really been doing anything to stimulate it. And so why isn't this innovation happening somewhere else where the government is doing something to stimulate it? The only place possibly that is more innovative than the United States is China. And there you do have a government that's probably more interested in amplifying this than here in the U.S. But other than that, I think we're doing okay.
So does your optimism include a confidence that the U.S. will remain the world center of technology innovation?
Is that a good thing?
Well, that's a debatable thing. I'm just asking you what you think.
I think it would be better if technological innovation wasn't centered anywhere. Look, I'm not really a nationalist. You know, I live in the United States, so I care what happens in the United States, but I would love to see, technology-based entrepreneurship thrive all over the world, and I don't think it really matters where the next Elon Musk comes from. If the next Elon Musk comes from Kenya, I think that would be just amazing. How awesome would that be?
Does it excite you to think about the potential of technology to raise the standards of living of the several billion people that are still basically left out? To me, that's just something we've started a number of our events over the years with gapminder.org data that shows it's a very optimistic view, but technology is going to be the force that allows those people to participate more and more. I mean, is that something you focus on? The
story of the last 50 years is that the wealth of the rest of the world has increased massively, and the wealth of the United States has stagnated. Is that a bad thing or a good thing? It's a bad thing for certain people in the United States who are being left out, of course. But I don't think it's a bad thing for mankind. I think it's a good thing for mankind. It's made us safer, right? I mean, we have terrorists, and it sucks, but I think that the standard of living, childhood deaths, disease, all these things are being, reduced at a very, very significant rate around the world. And I think that's a good thing for people who live in the United States and people who live around the world. But it's hard, because if you don't have a job and your kids don't have a job, that sucks.
I couldn't agree with you more, but let's see how far your optimism extends, because one of the things that is, even Andreessen has been a big party to this mindset, this meme, which is jobs are going to go away. And we don't really have a way to deal with those people. How do you feel about that?
Jobs as we know it, I think, may go away. But I don't think we're measuring this very well. Look, we have had, you and I were talking about this on email, we've had a decrease in the number of new business creation, new companies created, but that's something that's been going on for 30 or 40 years, and I think that's been driven as much by these big brands like Walmart and Costco and Starbucks and their impact on these small mom-and-pop, storefront businesses than anything else. But also, what is a business today? Okay, what we see, is we see 1.8 million sellers on Etsy. We see Stripe adding something like 10,000 new accounts.
That's one of your companies, right?
We are invested in Stripe.
Stripe is a great, we've had Stripe.
I see Shopify adding massive number of storefronts
Stripe's
every
an
month.
online transaction engine.
We see Kickstarter projects happening all over the place. So, what is a job? My kids have friends who got out of school and couldn't get a job. So they started driving for Juno and started driving for Lyft. Then they, got together with some friends and made a film and financed it on Kickstarter. Film got picked up by somebody, and then they got hired to make a web video series by Netflix. The next thing you know, they got a job. But they're a freelancer. They're not working for anybody. They're working for themselves. You know the Jay-Z line that I love? The Jay-Z line says, "I'm not in business, I'm a business," okay? That's the future. By the way, you're the same thing.
I'm a little bit of an entrepreneur.
You started this.
Yeah, we started this. Yeah. Oh, it's great. It's nice. It's still here 7 years later. We did create a job for ourselves. That's at least that. So
would you rather be doing this or working for some big old media company?
Well, that's not even a question. Yeah,
No,
I just wish I'd done it 20 years earlier. That's what I always say. How come I? Because
But
I
the
was
kids
afraid.
coming out of college today have to do it.
It's a way different mindset.
They have to do
yeah.
it. But is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think it's a good thing.
So you think that even as automation comes, spreads its tentacles across more and more and more of society, and many routinized jobs are replaced by automated function, that people will find things to do.
Well, that's what I see. That's what I see. Because if you look at, if you're measuring the number of companies that are being created or the number of full-time jobs that there are in the economy, you might be measuring the wrong thing. But what I see is people are still renting apartments. People are still, shopping at Whole Foods. People are still, able to, do the things that they need to do. So that money must be coming from somewhere else. And debt loads are not rising. We had this period where debt loads were really rising in our country, but that's not really happening anymore. So where's the money coming from? It's coming from somewhere else. And I think we're not doing a very good job of measuring the new economy. I think we're still using old economy measures to measure the economy, and we're missing a lot of this.
Is that because of free goods, among other things, like just things we get for free on our incredible magic, magic devices that are magic, truly?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. We actually, I don't know. The time is going to go. We've got a little more time, but
we have 3 minutes and 15 seconds.
No, that's not true.
Okay.
But we're going to go a little longer. But audience, get ready to ask a question. But I want to throw one thing out because your perspective is so interesting, and it's obviously in the news, and you're not an investor in Uber. But what has gone wrong at Uber, and what does that say to you about the system, or Silicon Valley, or the attitude of investors, or the mindset of entrepreneurs? I mean, there's a lot of lessons there that we have not yet learned.
I think that Uber had a strategy that didn't actually work, which was that they were going to run the table on the ride-sharing industry, and they were going to put everybody out of business by raising more money than anybody else so they could forward price and drive their competition out of business. They thought that there were network effects in that business, and that once they had done that, every driver would be on Uber and every rider would be on Uber, and then they would own the market in the way that Google has run the table on search.
And their name certainly reflects that mindset, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they thought that they were going to do in ride sharing what Google has done in search, and what Facebook has done in social, and what Amazon has done in commerce. And it turns out, for whatever reason, that you can't run the table on that market. The drivers will drive on multiple platforms. In their car, they'll have 4 phones up, and on one they're going to have Juno, and one they're going to have Lyft. And the other thing it turns out is that riders are very price conscious, and they're going to have 2 or 3 services on their phone, and they're going to constantly check to see the cheapest way to get home to Brooklyn at night, and it just didn't work.
Okay, so are the sort of elements of what I would say certainly illegality and more or less corruption that have emerged in parallel to all of that somehow a function of miscalculating on that and like overly aggressively pushing internally? I mean, even the sexism is a whole nother matter, but how do you explain all that morass of horrible stuff?
I mean, I think it all sort of comes from, that mindset of that we're gonna dominate this industry. We're gonna win this battle, and we're gonna win it at all costs.
Did you ever consider investing? Did you meet Travis Kalanick?
I did.
What happened when he pitched you?
We didn't like each other.
Well, I think your instinct might have been right there. Okay.
Or his instinct might have been right. I
Well,
mean, look, you know.
Hey, he got money somewhere. There's no doubt about that.
Well, I mean, had we invested when we had that
You
opportunity.
would have made a lot of money.
On paper. No one's made any money in reality on that company. But
There have been some private transactions, haven't there?
I don't think so. I think the other thing that they've done is they've locked up their cap table so tightly, and this is part of the problem. It really, everything that's gone wrong is a function of their strategy to control everything and go very aggressively. Travis never wanted any secondary to happen because he had a voracious appetite for primary capital. So he locked up his cap table, and that's made people very desperate.
Okay, who has a question or comment for Fred? And, you know, we do believe in comments as well as questions.
Oh, I like that.
Right here, get the mic.
Not a lot of people do that when they do Q&A.
Well, we've been doing this a long time. We totally, okay, that's fine. Did you have your hand up, Linda?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I did.
Okay, ask a very good question, because I didn't call anyone.
Or a
Go ahead.
comment.
Or comment,
I
yeah.
think it's a good question.
Okay,
Okay. So I love the fact that you're really optimistic about the future, and you're using examples that everybody can be entrepreneurial, have their own business, but some people don't have that mindset. They'd rather be a worker. I know there's people who could just drive for the Ubers and the Lyfts of the world, but can you answer what other kind of opportunities someone
Esther's
can
nodding
have?
at that one.
I'm
Thank you.
sorry?
No, that's a very good one.
I'm not,
you.
by
I
the
don't
way,
know if it's a comment or a question,
I'm
but
not
it's very good.
suggesting that everybody's going to be an entrepreneur. I'm just suggesting that more and more people are going to be entrepreneurs. There will be jobs for people who want to just have a job.
And that's what I'm asking.
Right.
What kind of jobs that you foresee that are not entrepreneurial, but that maybe can support the
We're still going to need nurses. You know, we're still going to need teachers. We're still going to need, people who, provide, fundamental, human need, food. People in the food industry. I think there's going to be plenty of jobs. I'm not of this view that all the jobs are going to be wiped out by machines. Some will, for sure.
Oh, no, I was just thinking that maybe you had some clever idea of like how the new, technology could help support some of the people that don't want to be entrepreneurs, but they want to be part of that new wave. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's all sorts of new ways to find jobs. There's all sorts of new ways to rent apartments. There's all sorts of new ways to, basically live a lower cost lifestyle. As you were saying, one, the other thing that's going on is that if you want, the cost of living can be much, much lower today than it was in the past, because there's a lot of things that you don't need to do. You don't need to own a car anymore. Like, there's a lot of things you don't need to do. I'm fortunate because I have kids who are in their 20s who, came into the workforce in the past 5 years, and I've watched how they and their friends have navigated it, and they're much more mobile in terms of they don't sign long-term leases, they move around a lot.
They don't want to buy a car, that's for sure.
They don't have cars. They use lower cost ways of doing lots and lots of things, and they find jobs. Some of them use freelance networks to find jobs. Some of them use some of the new technologies to find full-time jobs. I think certainly the age of being able to go get a job and feel secure, I think that's gone. But I think you can have a job and not have to be an entrepreneur.
Okay, just to keep moving quickly.
Yeah, so
Identify yourself.
Irving Vladowski, and I'm a friend of David.
And a longtime IBM tech leader and thinker. Go on.
So let me add to Fred's optimism about our institutions, and I think it's because our system of checks and balances is actually brilliant. I mean, that's not a new thing, but let me add to that system not just the federal government. Let me add the role of the states, the role of the press, of course, and the role of business. And I really believe that one of the most socially liberal forces in the country is the business community. And look at gay marriage. Look at the ouster of Bill O'Reilly. It's because the advertiser said, if Daimler feels that their female customers aren't going to buy Mercedes if Bill O'Reilly is part of their thing. There goes Bill O'Reilly. So a lot of it is the feedback from
What
the
about
marketplace.
tech, though, Irving? Do you think that the tech, the individual empowered by the internet is part of it, too?
It could be, but I'm more focusing on empirically what has happened.
Okay.
No, I think healthcare, as broken as it is another example of that. The employers in this country provide most of the funding for healthcare, and have been very generous. Look at the new, maternal leave policies, paternal leave policies for newborns. I mean, there's a lot of things that big business is doing that is, as you say, very socially liberal.
Okay, if there are comments, you don't have to respond either. Quick, okay, back there, and we're going to try to just get a couple more, and then we're going to have to wrap. No, there. Let me pick them. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Good morning. So 3 quick things. First, data science is a job in tech with high growth where you don't have to be an entrepreneur. So there are jobs in tech too. On your optimism, though, if you look past the corporate balance sheets, debt loads are rising. If you look at car loans, both length and amount, if you look at credit card balances, Wall Street's pretty, especially the regional banks, are pretty uneasy about that right now. And then, when you share that, from what you see, people are still shopping at Whole Foods. Mark Zuckerberg did a great thing. You can argue whether it was enough, but he's going around the country to talk to people who aren't in Silicon Valley or New York or other centers. That might be something you want to do. It's not that great out there.
Interesting. Okay. That was, okay, Esther, because Esther's Esther. Okay, we'll get the mic to her.
Yeah, just to call out that a little more, you see kids coming out of college, but there are lots of kids who don't get into college and don't graduate from high school. And there are people who, if they invested in something that went bad, it's not part of 10 things they invest in where over time they'll do fine. There's a lot of people in the country who can't take those risks and don't have the funds or the education or the flexibility to do any of that stuff. And I'm not arguing with you, but I'm hoping you'll pay more attention to that part of the country, because those are the people who elected the person you don't want to talk about. And they're there, and they're really important. And we as a society need to figure out how to help them. If you don't agree with them, help them understand your point of view by giving them an education.
For sure. I think education is the answer to most of these problems.
Yeah, and let's just not stop. One of the things I should have said at the beginning, what Fred has done in his own philanthropic and personal energy work in education is extraordinary, particularly in New York City. I mean, he's on the board of NYU. He played a role in the merger with Poly, I believe. Right. He certainly helped start a huge bunch of computer education in the New York City schools, including starting an entire new high school for computer science-oriented education.
More than that, David.
Yeah, tell me more, because I know you've done so many things I can't even keep track of them.
What we've done here in New York, and we've started a national movement, is that we have made it so that every school building in New York City has a computer science teacher, including the elementary schools, and 10 to 15% of every middle school and every high school will have a 3-year or 4-year effectively major in computer science. Okay, so any kid from Brownsville, from the South Bronx, from anywhere, if they want to become a data scientist or a software engineer or a UX designer, will have the skills to be able to go get those jobs. I agree that education is the answer to a lot of the problems that we have in this country.
Yeah. There's so many things to talk about. Where's Simone? What?
We got to move on. We're getting the hook.
We got to move on. See, she's the boss. But what can I say? Luckily, we were very known for, in addition, taking comments on questions, for pretty much sticking on time, which is not that typical in our industry either. But Fred, this was great. I really appreciate you coming. Thank you so much.